So with that, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to updating you on what's been going on in my wheelhouse, leading the air safety organization, amongst other things, since our last Board of Directors meeting. So we are the Airline Pilots Association with a heavy emphasis on the word pilots. In fact, it should be in all caps. And for those of you who have been around me for any amount of time have probably heard me say ad nauseum that we lay claim to being the largest non-governmental aviation safety organization in the world. And we can legitimately say that because it's due to the participation of 420 national-level safety volunteers, 23 full-time engineering and air safety staff, tremendously talented staff, and literally hundreds of more safety, security, and pilot assistance volunteers that legitimately allows us to claim that. But that's not enough, because size without strategy is basically like velocity without vector. The thing that really makes us incredibly effective is the caliber of the work that they do every single day on your behalf. These pilot representatives work in the core areas of safety, security, pilot assistance, cargo, environmental, and jump seat issues. And they reflect literally hundreds of years worth of collective experience in every single aspect of the field of aviation. It's because of the efforts of these people in the United States, in Canada, and indeed around the world that we're everywhere we need to be. And it's something I'm extremely proud of, and it's something that you all should be extremely proud of as well. We have a record of accomplishment that no other organization can match. And that success often depends on having the mentality and the stamina of a marathoner when it comes to building and maintaining the strategic relationships that make us so effective. At the same time, agility is also incredibly important, and our success also depends on having the quick reflexes of a sprinter, and I think that's most recently evidenced by our response to the recent threats that happened in the wake of the Malaysian Flight 17 shoot-down. And of course, it's also reflected in what's happening this very minute, and that's the emerging threat of the Ebola pandemic. So Ebola is a perfect example of the need for coordination and working together, and it's also a very vivid example of what happens when that does not happen. We cannot let a lack of coordination and poorly communicated operational procedures happen in our industry. So since the first evidence of the Ebola outbreak, ALPA has worked with all relevant government agencies and organizations in both the United States and Canada with the goal of safeguarding air travel, of course for our flight crews, but also for our coworkers, our industry workers, and the traveling public. We are taking a leadership role in coordinating these government officials in their response to the disease. We are also keeping our members informed through push communications and dedicated resources to educate our air crews about the risk factors and also, very importantly, about the steps to take when you encounter a potential case, especially on board one of your flights. In fact, the website that we created is so well regarded that quite literally members of the House are now using it as a reference tool. Unfortunately, our work here is far from done. Our coordinated team will work closely with the newly appointed Ebola czar, as well as officials in Canada and at the international level through ICAO, to assess what other steps, again, we need to take to safeguard our aircrew, our passengers, and our coworkers from this terrible disease and indeed any other potential future contagions. We will continue to lead the coordination, and we will continue to generate the conversation between everybody involved to ensure that we are all on the same page. We will shape any potential operational guidance to our pilots and ensure that it works for our frontline employees. And we will continue to keep you informed just as we did last night. Today I'm going to give you an overview of the things that we've done for our pilots since the last board meeting and what we're working on moving forward. Because while we've seen a ton of successes over the last 4 years, the nature of the beast is that our work never, ever ends. And aviation may be the safest and most secure mode of transportation around today, but we can never, ever rest on those laurels. There are always going to be new angles to old issues, new challenges to conquer, and protections needed to maintain the safety strides we've already made. Put that all together, it means that ALPA is not only stronger moving forward, but the airline industry is safer and more secure moving forward. So let's start with what's most important for you and your pilots, and that's the work that ALPA has done on the work that directly affects you and the folks that you represent. Initiatives like known crew member. That was actually one of the first aim points that we had when the officers began their term in 2011, as well as the work securing the availability of the cockpit jump seat. The KCM program has evolved since our last board meeting, and I'm very proud to point out that we're still getting started. We're up to 60 airports, 130 checkpoints in those airports, and we're expanding to even more locations in 2015. And we're currently in discussions with TSA leadership for the first time to include Canadian members in that program. Our efforts to get the uniform requirement removed are bearing fruit, and I'm very optimistic that we will see an announcement sometime soon pointing out the fact that it's not the tie you wear, it's not the epaulets on your shoulder that determine the risk you present, it's your background. I should also note that in light of recently announced changes to risk-based programs such as PreCheck, this past week I sent a letter in to TSA formally requesting that our pilots automatically get grandfathered into that program to help meet the agency's goal of driving up the percentages of throughput on these risk-based programs. ALPA's jump seat initiatives protect pilot and command authority, and they support our no pilot left behind mantra. We are making this important program even more valuable to pilots everywhere. And in fact, we recently revised the jump seat guide, and hopefully, if we're successful in another area, we may need to revise it again. Because I'm happy to report that in September, we witnessed the first application of the International Jump Seat Program between two ALPA carriers, I should note. And we're working with the airlines and government to establish this as a permanent capability within the industry. North of the border, the Canadian government listened to ALPA's strong urging and ended its long-standing restriction against the use of the jump seat for offline jump seaters in cases where there were unless there were cases of no seats available in the back of the airplane. As I was pleased to report in the 2012 board, we worked with our partners to help get the first update to flight and duty time rules in more than 60 years with the new science-based FAR Part 117 standards. Now, for the first time in the United States, these rules address a pilot's circadian rhythm, duty limits, and onboard rest facilities. They provide education for pilots to address fatigue mitigation and a clear path to implementing fatigue risk management systems. Part 117, as we know, went into effect this past January, if you remember, just in time for the polar vortex. Unfortunately, as everybody also knows, these regulations fail to include pilots flying for all cargo airlines, so the battle rages on. We are continuing our collaboration with the FAA, and this past month we actually hosted a two-day symposium to emphasize the need for rules to be implemented equitably and properly, and to create a clear understanding of what is required of airline pilots and airlines. In Canada, we made a measurable gain in September when Transport Canada released a notice of proposed amendment to modify and reduce the maximum duty day length. And while it was not everything we wanted, it was a definite step in the right direction. And we must keep the pressure on to make sure that this change smoothly moves to the regulatory process. We remain committed to one level of safety for all pilots. After all, actually, let me do a spot poll. How many of you here are cargo pilots? Raise your hand. That's the wrong answer. You're all cargo pilots. The only difference is whether the person back there is wearing Mickey Mouse ears going down to Anaheim, or you're carrying an igloo full of iPods from Asia, right? It just depends on what sits behind the flight door. That's the only distinction. And we need to adopt that mentality. And nobody can tell me that the level of fatigue changes as you're passing over the top of an international border at 33,000 feet. In the United States, the new first officer minimum qualification rules also came out, and we're aggressively fighting efforts by some in industry to roll them back due to a so-called pilot shortage. I hope all of you have seen our whiteboard video explaining how it's not a pilot shortage, but it's a pilot pay shortage. And in fact, as I was flying down to the conference here, to the board, I was reading the RAA magazine, and I noted that in the very first page, there's a letter from the president of the RAA saying that anybody who doesn't buy into their notion that there's a significant pilot shortage right now should be subscribing to the Flat Earth Society. If you want to read that, the article is going to be right there. The aim point is pointed right between our eyes, folks. The new standard created significant safety improvements and an enhancement to the value of that ATP certificate that's sitting in your pocket right now. We've worked hard to get that message out to combat attempts to weaken these new regulations. Regulations, I might add, that the airlines arguing against them actually had a hand in creating. We helped create those standards and will protect those standards from those who want to water them down. And fortunately, ALPA is represented on a new aviation rulemaking committee on air carrier training that is looking at ways to further improve aviation safety through pilot training. In fact, Captain Chuck Hoagman, who's going to be here today, he may be in the audience right now, our aviation safety chair, is leading that effort, and you should thank not me, but thank him for those efforts. We amended, with the assistance of our training committee, our policy ahead of this activity to strengthen and clarify our position and thus our strategy. Another person you should thank who's also here is Captain Jerry McDermott, who leads our pilot assistance program. We're focused on health issues that may affect our pilots. And just this last year, the FAA's Federal Air Surgeon very discreetly announced a new policy on obstructive sleep apnea that would literally have pulled many of our pilots out of the flight deck, either temporary or permanently, taking away their medical certificates. Instead of simply acquiescing to these new changes, ALPA worked deliberatively and ALPA worked proactively with the FAA, and as a result, the agency will be issuing amended guidance to medical examiners that will enhance safety and health while preserving our medical certificates and our careers. On top of that, we are continuing to build strong relationships not only with the Federal Air Surgeon, but also with his counterpart in Transport Canada's Director of Aviation Medicine, I should say, so that we can work together on these issues and other similar items. And I should also note that our HIMSS program recently celebrated its 40th anniversaries, and that's 40 years of saving pilots' lives and saving pilots' careers. We are also concentrating on a number of other things that make our industry safer, which make our day-to-day jobs that much safer as well. ALPA lobbied ICAO to issue new technical instructions governing the carriage of lithium batteries as cargo. Those instructions included guidance on the packaging of these batteries, specific training for the shippers and handlers, and it outlined information that must be included on the notice to the pilots, because if you have no idea what kind of hazardous material you have in the back, how are you going to react appropriately to an in-flight emergency? Following that, the U.S. Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, otherwise known as PHMSA, issued regulations in July of 2014 that bring U.S. rules into compliance with ICAO technical instructions. They then issued a new Notice of Proposed Rulemaking in August to bring the U.S. into compliance with other hazmat rules. And just recently, ICAO took steps, actually, to ban the shipment of lithium metal batteries from passenger aircraft. And that's a ban, actually, that has been in place here in the United States for the last 10 years. So in one sense, ICAO was helping pull us up. In another sense, we were pulling up the ICAO standard, so we both benefited. Now, having said all that, there's certainly more ground to be done at ICAO to give lithium batteries protections afforded other hazardous materials, especially on cargo flights. Again, one level of safety. ALPA maintains the lobbying efforts for the continued funding of the Federal Flight Deck Officer Program, and for that you should thank Captain Fred Eisler, who's done a tremendous job not only lobbying but also helping to make sure the program is run appropriately. And we've also pushed for the installation of secondary cockpit barriers, and these are two programs directly related to enhancing onboard security. The FFDO program was transferred from the oversight of the TSA's Federal Air Marshal Service to the agency's Office of Training and Workforce Engagement on October 1st of this year. We have met with the new FFDO management, and we are optimistic that this change will result in more needed improvements to the program. Going forward, we will foster that relationship with them, and we will educate them on the importance of stable funding for these important security programs. On secondary barriers, there are bills in the United States House and Senate to require barriers on our aircraft, but clearly it's an uphill battle, especially in this incredibly paralytic congressional climate that we see with what is now being called the 113th Do-Nothing Congress. ALPA co-chaired the group that helped define the technical standards for secondary barriers, and again, although it is an uphill climb, the fight still rages on, and we will continue to directly lobby for legislation to require these devices, and our pilots will continue to advocate for them. We are promoting a just culture environment as well with programs such as FOQA and ASAP, and another program that you may not have heard about, but it's extremely important, called ASIAS, which is the Aviation Safety Information Analysis and Sharing Program, and more. Most importantly, we want to make sure that any modifications to these programs protect our pilots. Data is extremely important for safety, but we need to make sure that data is used for its intended purpose, and that is fixing problems and not assigning blame. We did that with the FAA reauthorization bill in 2012, and we're doing that now in seeking changes to the FAA's draft advisory circular proposal from September on ASAP program guidance. Similarly, several senior ALPA representatives participate in the groups that evaluate the way programs such as ASIAS are run and how data is collected and analyzed, again, to ensure it's strictly used for safety purposes. And we held a one-day conference on the proactive use of data as a means towards achieving a just culture. We had more than 100 safety reps from government and industry, and in fact, we had folks webcasting in from 27 different countries during that conference. As I mentioned earlier, there are always new mountains to climb, and we certainly are not shy about climbing them. The tragedy of Malaysia 17 highlighted the issue of how our pilots receive restricted airspace information, and the well-publicized closing this year of airspace prompted us to investigate how the government assesses risk and how the government decides on the timing of airfield prohibitions and airspace closures. So we met with the FAA's Assistant Administrator for Security and Hazardous Materials, which is where the effort resides in the government towards issuing the NOTAMs and doing risk assessment. And he briefed us this past August. But there's certainly more work to be done to ensure that our concerns are resolved. And we actually have follow-on meetings scheduled to understand how they will use the lessons learned from these most recent tragedies and how they will improve their risk management process. In the meantime, however, as you see, we have posted a current list of FAA restricted airspaces on the ALPA website as a reference point for our international pilots. And finally, two issues that we are going to be talking about till the cows come home. and that's next-gen and unmanned aircraft systems, which involves both autonomously piloted and also remotely piloted aircraft. ALPA has representatives literally at every level of discussion on both of these important issues, from setting the strategic direction to detailed technical standards setting level, and we will make sure that the pilot perspective is always included in those discussions and activities. For RPA, ALPA's position has been and will remain that remotely piloted aircraft are airplanes. They have pilots, and if they are in our airspace, we must be confident that they are just as safely built, just as well maintained, and responsibly flown as every other aircraft around us. And for next gen, we have emphasized the need for next gen initiatives to be done efficiently, without undue financial burden on our airlines, and most importantly, with input from line pilots and controllers to ensure that we have safe and practical usability of these procedures as we safely drive up the capacity of our airspace system. Now, you've probably noticed a recurring word in just about everything that I brought up, and that word is with. All of this work is accomplished with our pilots, with our staff, and due to our great relationships with industry and with government. It's truly a team effort, and I'm tremendously honored to be part of that team and work constantly towards being stronger moving forward. Now, I don't have time to do a deep dive into the full details, but I wanted to give you at least an idea of the breadth of ALPA's reach. And in fact, some of you, maybe last night, had the pleasure of meeting Terry Bristol, who's the CEO of our air traffic organization for the FAA. And she's basically the person that oversees all of the air traffic functions in the United States. And I hope you take the opportunity to meet her because she's going to be around for a little bit. That's the kind of relationships that we have here. And you can probably guess that we also work with ICAO, obviously with the FAA, and with Transport Canada. So a picture indeed is worth 1,000 words. And I should also send a shout out to Ambassador Worth out there, who everybody knows well, who did admirable work for us at ICAO. Moving over to industry, relationships not only with government are important, but also with the folks that own and run our airlines and the folks that manufacture the planes that we fly. The simple fact is that ALPA works with every single player who has impact in the world of aviation. Now, I know that there's lots of discussions out there about safety and politics, but the fact of the matter is that political advocacy works hand in hand with safety advancement, and it's what moves many of our safety programs forward. And much of that advocacy is accelerated through your participation in ALPA PAC, because this participation helps us open doors, it helps us gain access, and it helps us to develop relationships that exert influence on the decision makers that carry so much influence on the quality of our profession and the safety of our programs. That is the power of ALPA. That's the respect that is accorded ALPA, and that is the strength of our union. It shows up in our events, too, as it did at this year's Air Safety Forum, the 60th in our history, where we showcased the tremendous work our members do to provide every airline pilot with a safer and more secure profession. Please roll the tape.
To go out and make a significant contribution in this profession, you don't have to go out and save an entire world. You just have to keep one person from getting into trouble. That person, chances are, will never know that it was an ALPA air safety representative that helped influence a significant change to pilot training or to airport standards or to air traffic control procedures, or to the design of an aircraft cockpit, or even to the way that an airline fundamentally conducts business.
When everyone gives me this award and says that this program is because of me, it isn't true. It's because of all of the many, many ALPA volunteers that have worked together and who've supported us, who came to us and told us their stories of incidents or accidents that they had that they never had talked about because they never felt safe to do it.
Many of us benefit from a mentor or two along the way. In my case, it was Dick Duxbury who sort of pointed me along the path, and it seemed that every step of the way beyond that, it was Paul McCarthy who guided me, encouraged me. So thanks, Paul, for your influence, your guidance, and your friendship, and also the efforts that you continue to make on behalf of pilots worldwide.
No one could ever have had a better mentor than I did in Captain Steve Lucky. Steve taught me everything that I know about how to be an effective security volunteer, and he is truly a legend in this business.
If I had a magic wand, I would try to put it over every line pilot that I fly with who doesn't come to a conference or a forum like this, and try to explain to him how very complex the system is. I could sit in the cockpit, pound my chest, and say a lot of really strong things and great things about what I would do, what I could do. We need the people where the rubber meets the road, with the good data, with the good experience, to really tell folks what we do in the cockpit.
I'm proud of my ALPA work, helping address flight time duty issues as it relates to fatigue, progress in ultra-long flying rules, and identifying aircraft rescue, firefighting, dangerous goods, and other cargo issues.
There's hundreds of all-cargo flights all over the world that are flying without many of the same security measures that our passenger brethren enjoy. The biggest thing we can do is continue to press for that one level of safety and security.
Let's make tonight a celebration of what we've accomplished. And not only what we've accomplished in the past, but what we can and must fulfill for the future.
And I want to thank all of you, the volunteers who've done this work. This is for you.
Let me point out something. That video, along with the iPhone app that we had the Air Safety Forum on, along with the jump seat guide, were all powered by ALPA. They were all done in-house by our tremendously talented staff and IT Common Safety, and when you see them, please give them a pat on the back. I should also point out that I'm hoping they're here. Two of those legends of safety, security, and pilot assistance are actually in the audience right now, I believe. One of them is Captain Robert Hamilton from PSA, and the other one is Captain Bill DeGrow from Envoy Airlines. Do you guys happen to be here right now? And if so, please stand up. Thank you for your efforts, and thank you for the leadership that you bring to your groups. Another recurring theme in that video was that many of the safety volunteers that we saw had somebody very important standing next to them, their spouses and their significant others. So it's a good reminder today for us to thank our spouses and families for supporting us for the incredibly important work we do on behalf of our members. While the ASO's mission is clear, the job will never, ever be complete. We must constantly remain alert. We must constantly adapt. We must constantly remain agile. If we do all those things, we will continue to remain the safest form of transportation, literally, in the history of the world. And if we stay the course, we will remain stronger moving forward. Thank you so much.